I gave my husband 12 years. 12 years of love, loyalty, sacrifices, and quiet forgiveness. And one Monday morning over coffee, he looked me in the eye and said, "Maybe we should take a little break. Just 2 weeks. To fix us. Fix us." There was no us left. I'd felt it slipping for months, him pulling away, coming home later, smiling at texts he never let me see. But I played along. I agreed to the break, packed his weekend bag myself, even smiled when he left. And on day 3, while I was folding his laundry and watering our dying houseplants, he posted a picture online with her. Smiling, matching drinks, his hand on her thigh. You'd expect me to scream, cry, or beg, right? Not this time. I didn't lose it. I didn't lose him. He lost me. What he didn't know was that I'd already started watching him long before that post, and that this time I wasn't playing the patient wife anymore. Stay with me, because of what happened next. It didn't just end his affair. It ruined his reputation, his job, and everything he took for granted. You want revenge with class. You want drama that actually happened behind closed suburban doors. Then you're exactly where you need to be. 12 years. That's how long I'd been someone's wife, someone's mother, someone's better half. It started with a dress I sewed myself a sunset ceremony in Savannah, and a man named Mark who looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that made sense. Back then, we didn't have much. Just 2 college degrees, a second-hand car, and a 1-bedroom apartment with creaky floors and a water heater that groaned louder than we did during winter. But we had big dreams. He was just starting out as an architect, all ambition and coffee breath. I worked at a small press as an assistant editor, still hoping one day I'd write a novel of my own. Then life happened. When our first baby came, we cried tears of joy. When the second came along 3 years later, we cried again, but for different reasons. Sleepless nights, bills, spit-up diapers, and the weight of being adults with tiny humans relying on us for everything. And that's when we made what felt like the smart choice. I would stay home just for a few years, until they were in school, until things settled, until we caught our breath. But years don't wait for you to catch your breath. They just keep moving. Mark's career took off. Promotions, bonuses, company retreats. I cheered him on even when he missed dinner, even when he forgot our anniversary because of a client pitch. I told myself this was love, this was partnership. I meanwhile faded gently into the background. I became the keeper of lunchboxes, the appointment scheduler, the PTO volunteer, the carpool savior, the weekend laundry warrior. I traded manuscripts for grocery lists. I gave up the name on my desk for the one embroidered on my kids' backpacks, Emily's mom. I didn't regret it, not at first. But slowly I began to notice that Mark didn't really see me anymore. I wasn't angry, just invisible. He'd walk in after work and barely make eye contact. He started taking his phone into the bathroom. Work trips got longer, conversations shorter, affection rare. When I brought it up, he'd say, "It's just stress," or "You're reading too much into it." So I stopped bringing it up. But I started paying attention. The change in cologne, the unexplained charges at restaurants we never visited, the way his eyes lit up at text messages he wouldn't let me see. Still, I said nothing. I smiled. I made dinner. I kissed his cheek before bed. Then came the Monday morning in early May. It was a normal day. I'd packed the kids' lunches, signed a permission slip for a school field trip, and was wiping down the counter when Mark walked in, suit freshly pressed, hair still damp from the shower. He poured coffee in silence. I thought he was distracted by a meeting. Then, without looking at me, he said, "I think we should take a break." I paused, dish towel in hand. "A break?" He cleared his throat. "Yeah, just 2 weeks. Some space. I think we need time apart to figure things out, to remember what we had." He said it gently, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror. I stood there still calm. I didn't ask questions. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just listened. "Just a couple weeks," I asked. He nodded. "It's not like I want a divorce. Just time, to clear our heads. "Where would you stay?" "I already booked a hotel," he replied too quickly. "Downtown, close to the office." Ah, so this wasn't a sudden thought. I looked at him, really looked. This was the man I had nursed through the flu, cheered from the sidelines at his company softball games, whispered dreams to in the dark. And now he was offering me silence, space, 2 weeks of nothing. I smiled. "Just a little." "Okay," I said. His brows lifted, almost surprised. Maybe he expected resistance. Maybe he hoped I'd beg. Instead, I nodded and began loading the dishwasher. Later that evening, he packed a suitcase, just a small one, 3 dress shirts, a pair of jeans, his favorite cologne. I didn't ask why he was packing the blue one, the one he always wore on special nights. I just folded it neatly and set it in the bag for him. He kissed the kids goodnight like he was going on a business trip. They didn't suspect a thing. Neither did he. When he walked out the door, he didn't look back. But I did. Not at him, but at the life we'd built. The years I'd given. The version of me that had disappeared inside this quiet, tidy house. He thought this was his decision, his moment of control. But the truth? He was already a few steps behind. Because weeks before that Monday, I had already started noticing patterns, discrepancies, lies wrapped in soft voices and late meetings. I didn't confront. I didn't accuse. I documented. I prepared. I'd spent 12 years folding his laundry and biting my tongue. He thought I'd spend 2 more weeks waiting by the phone. Not a chance. Mark had asked for space. He was about to learn what it felt like to truly be alone. He thought I didn't notice. That was his first mistake. Mark had always been a man of patterns. Keys on the entryway table, shoes in the same spot, phone plugged in on the nightstand face up like a worn-out habit. But patterns are what make red flags easier to spot, because the moment something shifts even slightly, your gut knows before your head does. The first thing I noticed. His phone. He used to leave it unattended on the counter sometimes, even forgot it in the car. But one evening about 4 months ago, I heard it buzz while he was in the shower. A soft ding that used to mean nothing. This time he jumped out soaking wet to grab it, muttering something about work, and pulling it close like it was a loaded gun. From that night on, the phone never left his pocket. It was on silent more often than not. Face down, locked with a new passcode. It wasn't just the secrecy, it was the shift in how he carried it. As if he was guarding something precious, or damning. Then came the smell. Mark had worn the same cologne since our engagement, a clean, woodsy scent I'd picked out myself. But in February, I caught a whiff of something new, sharper, muskier, not unpleasant but definitely unfamiliar. I asked about it casually while folding laundry. "Oh," he said, not missing a beat. Someone at the office was testing samples for their husband. It must have rubbed off on my jacket. I nodded, but I made a mental note. The late nights started shortly after. "I'm slammed," he'd say. End of quarter chaos, or new client meetings. Always vague, always last minute. Sometimes he'd text at 7 p.m. saying he was grabbing drinks with coworkers, people I'd never heard of. I stopped asking questions, not because I didn't care, but because I was listening more carefully than ever before. The moment that solidified my suspicions came on a Thursday night. I was up late organizing the garage, one of those mundane tasks I kept putting off. Mark came home around 10:30, claimed he was stuck in traffic after dinner with a supplier. But when he hugged me half-heartedly distracted, I smelled that cologne again. Except this time it was mixed with something sweeter. Vanilla. Or maybe coconut. The kind of scent women wear when they want to be remembered. I didn't say a word. I simply wrote it down. The date, the time, what he said, what I observed. From that night forward, I started a system. An old leather-bound notebook I kept in the back of my closet. I wrote everything in it: dates. He came home late, what he was wearing. His excuse: any unusual charges on our bank card. I took photos of receipts when he left them on the counter. Screenshotted credit card transactions from our shared account, and saved them to a private folder on my laptop. There was one charge $68 at a wine bar downtown. Mark didn't drink wine. I knew that because I'd been pouring his beers for 12 years. Then there was a payment to a flower shop. Client birthday, he said. Our office sends bouquets to high-tier accounts. That florist was in a different city, one we didn't have clients in. Again, I didn't argue. I documented. There was one night we almost fought. I'd brought up the kids' upcoming recital and suggested we have dinner as a family beforehand. A perfectly innocent request. But Mark tensed. I told you I might have a dinner with investors, he snapped. I reminded him gently that he hadn't mentioned it, that he'd actually said his calendar was open. He looked at me for a long moment, then softened. Sorry. Just tired. Everything's a blur lately. That's when I realized he was rehearsing. Lines, lies, apologies. And I had been letting the scenes play out without acknowledging the script. So I created my own. I went through our bank statements weekly, flagging anything unusual. I logged his comings and goings. I reviewed the shared iCloud calendar and cross-referenced with his claimed appointments. There were cracks everywhere. I even created a color-coded spreadsheet. Old habits from my editing days die hard. Green meant routine. Yellow meant questionable. Red meant it didn't add up. By the beginning of April, I had too much red to ignore. What's funny is that I never went looking for proof of cheating. I wasn't trying to catch him. I was trying to remember myself what it felt like to trust my instincts, to believe my intuition was valid. I didn't cry. I didn't confront. I simply prepared. People imagine betrayal as one big event, a kiss, a lie, a hotel keycard. But sometimes it's hundreds of tiny paper cuts. Quiet deceptions stacked one on top of another until you're bleeding and no one can see. Mark didn't know I'd already started my quiet inventory. By the time he asked for a break, I already knew what he was doing. I just didn't know who with. Yet. But I was going to find out. And when I did, I wouldn't just have feelings. I'd have facts. He thought it was just a break. I saw it as reconnaissance. Day 3. That's how long it took. 3 days after he left with his carefully packed weekend bag and hollow promises of space and perspective. Mark posted a photo that changed everything. I wasn't even looking for it. It was 6:42 on a Wednesday evening. The kids were watching cartoons. I was halfway through reorganizing the pantry, labeling storage bins like it would bring order to the chaos in my marriage. My phone buzzed with a text from Marlene, an old friend of ours from church. Hey, I thought you should see this. Maybe it's nothing. But I figured you'd want to know. Attached was a screenshot. Mark. At a rooftop bar. Sunset behind him. Glass of bourbon in one hand. His other hand resting casually but unmistakably on the bare knee of a woman sitting beside him. Just her legs visible. Slim, tanned, manicured fingers holding a wine glass. She wore red heels. Not the modest kind. The kind you wear when you know someone will be looking. And someone was. He had posted it to his public Facebook profile. No caption. Just a location tag and the clinking glasses emoji. Classy. I stared at the image for a full minute before zooming in. Yes. That was his wedding ring still on his hand. Yes. That was the blazer I'd bought him for our 10th anniversary. Yes. That was Mark on a break from our marriage, apparently finding himself between another woman's thighs. Another ping. This time from Trish, my old college roommate. Girl. Tell me this is some kind of mix-up. Is that Mark? You okay? Then another. And another. 3 women. All silent. All sending screenshots like pieces of a puzzle no one wanted to admit they were solving. None of them commented publicly. They knew better. We were women raised to protect other women in silence if needed. But the message was clear. They saw it. I saw it. And now, he would see me. And the strangest thing, I didn't cry. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't scream. I didn't fall to the floor in a heap like some network drama version of heartbreak. Instead, I smiled. It wasn't a bitter smile. It was quiet, clean, cold, like the kind of smile a chess player wears when she sees the next 5 moves ahead. You see, the moment he posted that picture, Mark gave me something more powerful than suspicion. He gave me proof. And with proof, I didn't need to ask. I didn't need to beg. I didn't need to doubt myself anymore. I needed to act. So I did. Phase 1. Gather intel. No more passively collecting patterns. I went full investigation mode. Because now I wasn't just looking for why he pulled away. I was looking for who gave him permission to betray a decade of marriage so publicly. I started by saving the photo in multiple places. My cloud, a USB drive, a backup folder titled House Projects, because Mark never bothered to learn how file directories work. I reverse searched the image to pull metadata location timestamp. The rooftop bar had a public event that night listed on Instagram. A wine tasting. I called the bar the next day under a fake name, claiming to be interested in booking a table, and asked if a photographer had been present. Bingo. Yes, we had a lifestyle blogger on site, the hostess said. She posted several photos from the night. I found her. A woman named @SipAndCity on Instagram. Stylish local influencer type. She had posted a carousel of pictures from the event guests mingling, sipping, posing. Slide 3 Mark. And this time the woman's face was visible. Not just a pair of legs anymore. Now she had a face. And a name. Rebecca M. Tagged. Her profile was public. Sales rep, early 30s. Blonde, filtered, curated. Recent posts included a gym selfie, a boomerang from a spa, and just 2 weeks ago, a quote. Sometimes the best thing you can do for your soul is walk away from comfort and into chaos. Oh, honey, you have no idea the kind of chaos you're stepping into. I didn't react. I documented. Screenshots, links, saved stories, date stamps. I even started a new notebook. The red leather one I'd been saving for something meaningful. Turns out revenge deserves a little style. In it, I began logging everything I found. The mutual friends they followed. The restaurant check-ins. Her LinkedIn page where she'd proudly posted about a recent marketing pitch with a firm that just so happened to align with Mark's largest account. Cross-referencing the dates of her check-ins and Mark's calendar dinner meetings, I found 6 overlaps. 6. One even fell on our anniversary. My hands didn't shake. My stomach didn't lurch. I felt calm. Because clarity has a way of silencing all the noise. By the end of day 4, I had an organized digital folder of evidence. Nothing illegal, nothing dramatic, just details, facts. Because I didn't plan to confront him. Not yet. Mark thought posting that picture was a flex. He thought it would prove to the world that he still had it. That he could be desirable, unattached, carefree, even while technically still married. What he didn't realize is that I wasn't watching as his wife. I was watching as his exit strategist. And darling, the next move was mine. I didn't want a confrontation. I wanted confirmation. By the time the kids were asleep and the dishwasher hummed its nightly rhythm, I sat alone at the kitchen table and opened my laptop. My fingers moved with a calm I didn't fully understand. I wasn't planning revenge yet. Not entirely. First, I needed the truth. I created a burner Instagram account. New Gmail, new name, no posts. I followed a few generic interior design accounts and 2 local boutiques just to make it look legitimate. My new identity. Claire Whitmore lived somewhere between boring and believable. The kind of profile no one would question. Then I typed in the name tagged in the rooftop photo Mark posted. Her name was Rebecca M. Her profile was public. Her smile was polished, her highlights intentional, but something didn't sit right. I scrolled through her photos slowly, not just looking at images, but reading between lines. Captions, comments, likes. It felt like a digital autopsy. One post caught my eye. A group photo at a trendy tapas bar. In the comments, someone had written, "That marketing squad glow tho," and Rebecca replied, "Tasha's the real star, always stealing the spotlight." Tasha. That was the first thread that pulled the rest apart. I clicked on Tasha's name. Her profile was private, but her bio said plenty. Marketing manager at Whitman and Rowe. Coffee first, chaos later. Whitman and Rowe. That was Mark's company. I froze. It wasn't Rebecca after all. Or maybe it wasn't just her. I requested to follow Tasha with my burner. 20 minutes later, I was in. Her profile was a curated blend of trendy brunches, beach sunsets, filtered selfies, and vague quotes that meant more than they admitted. There were no photos of Mark, but the timing of her posts, the places she visited, and especially the captions, those told the real story. You deserve to be someone's priority. If he wanted to, he would. Some connections don't need labels. She was soft launching an affair in real time. I compared her recent posts with Mark's calendar. She'd posted a photo of an old-fashioned resting on a high-end marble bar. I held it side by side with the image Mark had shared. Same bar, same chairs, same night. Another post showed her in a man's blazer with the caption, "Sometimes you just borrow confidence." That one made me pause. Not because it was obvious, but because I recognized the blazer. It had been hanging in our coat closet 3 days ago. Still, I didn't panic. I documented. I created a spreadsheet. Named it something innocent enough to avoid suspicion Q2 inventory. Inside, I tracked her posts, timestamps, and paired them with Mark's calendar entries and expense reports. I still had access to his company's travel portal and our shared email. He hadn't thought to block me out yet. A $97 dinner charge at the Garrison, a place we'd only been once years ago. The same night she posted, "Date nights hit different when it feels right." A $12.99 florist charge 2 blocks from her apartment a week before Valentine's Day. I never saw those flowers. A Venmo transaction from Tasha to Mark with the note, "Thanks for covering." Her account was still public. I screenshotted everything. That weekend I drove by Whitman and Rowe. I didn't get out of the car. I didn't need to. But something about seeing the building with my own eyes made everything real. From the outside, it looked like success. Sleek windows, modern signage, a busy parking lot full of leased cars and business casual ambition. But now I knew what was festering inside. I didn't message Tasha. I didn't text Mark. I didn't cry. I wasn't ready for the storm yet. But I was drawing the map. Because this wasn't about Tasha. It was about Mark. He was the one who made vows. He was the one breaking them. Tasha was a symptom, not the disease. But I kept watching her. The next day she posted a selfie, wind-blown hair, sunglasses, captioned "the calm before the glow-up." I saved that too. Because her calm was about to end. And mine was just beginning. By Monday morning, the temperature in my bones had changed. I wasn't reacting anymore. I was planning. There's a shift that happens when the pain subsides just enough to let strategy in. I felt it the moment I sat down with my second cup of coffee and scrolled past Tasha's latest post, some blurred photo of a cappuccino, and the quote, "Every setback is a setup for a comeback." It didn't even sting anymore. It read like a prompt from a self-help calendar. I opened my contacts and scrolled until I saw her name. Meredith A. We hadn't spoken in a few months, maybe closer to a year, but the kind of friendship we had didn't need maintenance. We met in undergrad roommates sophomore year, and somehow stayed connected through weddings, kids, and chaotic moves. Meredith was now a family lawyer. A good one. She didn't just know the law, she understood people, especially women like me. She picked up on the second ring. Her voice was the same as always, a mix of brisk professionalism and warm familiarity. I didn't dive into the whole story. I didn't need to. I just said Mark asked for a 2-week break, and 3 days later he posted a photo with another woman. I'm not interested in yelling. I'm interested in protecting myself. There was a pause. Then Meredith asked the right question. Do you have evidence? I exhaled slowly and nodded even though she couldn't see me. Yes. Photos, social media posts, credit card statements, even Venmo history. I've saved everything. She didn't say wow or gasp or ask if I was sure. She simply said, "Then let's get you ahead of this. Not just legally, financially, emotionally. I want you prepared, not blindsided." We set a meeting for Wednesday. In person. She told me to bring everything. Flash drive printed copies, a list of assets separate and joint. It felt both terrifying and empowering, like packing for a storm I no longer feared. That night after the kids were asleep and Mark still hadn't texted since our last check-in, I sent another message. This time not to a lawyer. I opened Facebook and found another old friend, Camille. She had worked in HR for a different branch of Whitman and Rowe years ago, but last I heard she'd been promoted to a senior compliance role. We'd lost touch after her divorce, but I remembered her sharp memory and even sharper instincts. I typed carefully. "Hey Camille. Long time I know. I have a weird and delicate favor to ask off the record. Do you still have any connections in HR over at Whitman and Rowe?" I hesitated before hitting send. Within minutes, she replied, "Hi, stranger. I do. Is everything okay?" I took a breath and wrote back. "Let's just say I have reason to believe someone in their marketing department is involved with someone married, and it may involve conduct violations. I'm not looking to cause damage, but I do want to understand the boundaries." Camille responded within the hour, confirming that she'd make a few discreet calls. She understood the company's policies, especially concerning intra-office relationships and ethics clauses, and she was clear it would be subtle, legal, and strictly anonymous. I didn't say much more. She didn't press. But Camille was the kind of woman who could read between lines. She sent one final message that evening. "I don't know exactly what's going on, but I can tell you this. No one plays with fire in corporate settings without leaving smoke. I'll let you know what I find." The next morning I opened a fresh notebook. I titled the first page Operations. I listed everyone I had contacted. Meredith, Camille, the timeline of events. I began drawing lines, making notes, tracking everything from the bank accounts to the utility bills. I wasn't leaving anything to chance. At school pickup, my neighbor Karen noticed I was wearing lipstick. She smiled gently and said, "You look good today. Strong." I just smiled back. No explanation. But in that moment, I realized people were watching. They didn't know details, but they sensed the shift. The silence before something significant. I didn't tell anyone the full story, but I didn't have to. In whispers and knowing glances and quiet support, offered without context, I felt the weight of a network gathering around me. Women who had seen things, lived through worse, understood without needing to ask. Mark was still quiet. No follow-ups, no questions. That told me everything I needed to know. He wasn't waiting to reconcile. He was hoping I'd fade into the background while he stepped into a new life with a woman who thought brunch quotes counted as emotional depth. But I wasn't fading. I was fortifying. And this time I had allies. By Thursday, the silence from Mark had grown too obvious to ignore. No questions, no emotional check-ins, no signs of reflection or regret. Just the quiet arrogance of a man who believed he'd pulled off something clean. And that, more than anything, told me how deep into this new fantasy he had fallen. He wasn't waiting for reconciliation. He was assuming I'd either move on quietly or eventually accept his new normal. That gave me my opening. I waited until Friday evening when I knew he'd be settled somewhere comfortable. Then I sent a simple message. "I've been thinking. Maybe we should talk when the break ends. If there's still something worth saving, we owe it to the kids." It wasn't a plea, just a breadcrumb. Mark took the bait like I knew he would. He replied within an hour. "I think that's fair. Let's talk next week. Maybe dinner." He even added a smiling emoji. That was his tell. He always used emojis when he thought he had the upper hand. By the time he sent that reply, I had already contacted a private investigator. Meredith had a list. Discreet, licensed, experienced professionals. I picked one named Craig Holden, a retired cop turned PI now specializing in domestic infidelity. He didn't ask for the drama, just the timeline names and locations. I told him about Tasha, the rooftop bar photo, the break, the corporate event scheduled for next weekend, and the hotel Mark had used before. Craig didn't blink. I'll be in the area that night. Discretion is guaranteed. I'll need access to shared credit card info and a description of both parties. He was more clinical than comforting, but that's exactly what I needed. I wasn't looking for empathy. I was building a case. All week I kept playing the role, sent Mark light messages enough to seem genuine, asked about the kids, even said I was glad he was getting space. It was disgusting how easy it was to fake hope. He responded warmly, even flirtatiously. And each message he sent made me feel more resolved. This wasn't a man in conflict. This was someone auditioning a new life while keeping the old one warm on the back burner. Friday came quickly. The company was hosting a semi-formal networking party at the downtown ballroom of the Andover Hotel, the perfect venue for secrets wrapped in satin. I knew he'd invite her. That's how it always started: corporate parties, hand-holding in dark corners, whispered conversations by the elevator. I didn't tell the kids where I was going that night. I arranged a sleepover for them at my sister's and stayed home pretending to read. Craig called me at 10:48 p.m. He left the event at 10:35 with the woman matching your description. Both appeared intimate. They entered the Andover Hotel through the East Lobby entrance. Security camera caught them at check-in. They're staying on the 9th floor. His voice was even controlled, detached. He wasn't shocked. This was routine. For him. My heart didn't break. It didn't even crack. Instead, it crystallized into something hard and clear. Craig sent me time-stamped images via secured link, Mark's hand on her lower back, Tasha laughing as they waited for the elevator, a receipt showing the room charge placed on our shared credit card, 2 glasses of wine charged to the room an hour later, and finally a shot of the hallway camera as they entered the room together. It was undeniable, clean, legal, documented. The PI had also collected earlier images, them leaving the party, Mark brushing her hair from her shoulder, Tasha resting her head briefly on his arm as they walked through the lobby. These weren't one-off mistakes or poorly judged moments. These were deliberate actions made under the assumption that I was too naive or too weak to watch closely. Craig's final report was ready the next day. He included logs, receipts, metadata from the camera footage, and digital copies of all still images. He even included a breakdown of legal admissibility should I choose to use any of it in court. I saved it all to 2 different cloud accounts and 1 external hard drive. Mark texted me the next morning. Last night went later than I thought. Work stuff. Still want to talk next week? I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I typed, absolutely. I have a lot to say. And hit send. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse. That would have been satisfying but short-sighted. I wasn't here for a fight. I was here for the finish. Now I had evidence. Not suspicion, not gossip, not vague feelings or half-truths. I had hotel records, time-stamped photos, credit card charges, and enough visual documentation to destroy any lie he might attempt to construct. And he had no idea. He thought this was still his game. That's what made it so easy to smile when I read his next message. Glad to hear that. I've missed talking to you. He had no idea just how much I'd learned in his silence. The following Monday began like any other. Mark clocked into work at 8:45 a.m. His usual smug confidence likely intact, still basking in the afterglow of his weekend rendezvous. He had no idea that by noon everything he'd so carefully balanced was about to come crashing down. I had made sure of that. I'd timed everything deliberately. I didn't want an email. I didn't want a text. I wanted him served publicly, precisely, and legally. There's something symbolic about having a man handed divorce papers in the very place where he felt most untouchable. At 11:13 a.m., the process server stepped into the lobby of Whitman and Rowe, asked for Mark by name, and waited patiently by the reception desk while someone called him down. Mark came down the glass staircase, still adjusting his cufflinks. According to the server's later recount, Mark looked curious, then amused, assuming it was maybe a delivery or something work-related. When he was handed the envelope and told it was a petition for divorce, his expression collapsed. He blinked, asked the server to repeat himself, then stood frozen for several seconds as the weight of reality began to settle in. He signed for the packet, but the confusion never left his face. This wasn't how things were supposed to go. I wasn't supposed to be the one leaving. I was supposed to wait, forgive, be grateful if he came back. That's the script men like Mark write for women like me. And I had just torn it in half in front of his entire office. I didn't wait long for the message. Just before noon, my phone buzzed. "What the hell is this?" it read, followed by, "You filed for divorce." Are you serious right now? I let the messages sit unread for almost an hour before I responded. Yes. And the documentation has already been submitted. The next message came immediately. This was a break, a temporary pause. You can't just end it like this. I didn't reply. But in my mind, I said what I'd been thinking for weeks. I didn't end it. You did, on the 9th floor of the Andover Hotel, in a bed paid for with our shared credit card. The divorce papers weren't just a declaration. They were a legal blueprint backed by months of planning. Attached was the full evidentiary file from Craig the PI, formatted and cataloged by my attorney. Included were time-stamped images, signed witness statements, a chain of custody for all media, and a breakdown of Mark's financial conduct during the marriage. Everything was airtight, and more importantly, all admissible. Meredith, my friend and lawyer, had walked me through every clause. Adultery in our state still carried weight in court when it came to division of property, particularly if proven with tangible evidence. And I had tangible evidence in spades. The hotel receipts alone were enough. But the photos, the messages, the credit card charges, those sealed the deal. Mark had no idea that his so-called break had been legally interpreted and now judicially weaponized. He had made the mistake of thinking that emotional boundaries could protect him from legal ones. But law doesn't care about feelings, it cares about facts. And the facts were stacked against him like bricks in a wall he'd built himself. That afternoon, I received a call. It was Mark. I let it ring. And ring. On the 4th attempt, I answered. Calmly. Quietly. "I don't understand," he said. "I thought we were going to talk. You said you wanted to try." I said I had things to say. And I did. Through the paperwork. He was silent for a long moment. Then his voice changed, like a man trying to regain control of a conversation he thought he still owned. "This isn't fair. You blindsided me. No, Mark. What wasn't fair was cheating during a marriage break. What wasn't fair was bringing another woman into our life and assuming I'd sit quietly while you figured out whether I was still convenient. I didn't blindside you. I just stopped pretending." His anger built quickly. "This is going to get ugly if you keep pushing this." "No," I said flatly. "It won't, because I already pushed it, all the way to the courthouse, and now it's just business." He hung up. By the end of that week, his attorney contacted Meredith to begin discussions. But the tone was different. There was no bravado, no posturing, just quiet requests for clarification and a subtle underlying desperation to make this go away quickly. But I wasn't interested in quick. I was interested in closure. What Mark never realized is that this wasn't just about the affair. It was about the erasure, the slow fade he tried to perform, the way he diminished me in real time in plain sight while I held our family together. His greatest mistake wasn't cheating. It was assuming I wouldn't notice. His second was assuming I wouldn't act. By Friday, Meredith had filed the full case summary with the county clerk. A court date was scheduled, discovery was underway, and Mark, once so certain of his control, was left scrambling for explanations both at work and in whatever fantasy he had built with Tasha. And me, I was just getting started. By the second week after Mark had been served the divorce papers, the quiet buzz in our social circle began to shift into something more tangible. It started subtly. An old friend from college tagged me in a photo from 5 years ago, smiling with Mark at a barbecue, but her comment read, "Glad to see how strong you're staying. Some things are blessings in disguise." Another neighbor, a retired nurse I barely knew outside of Sunday greetings, handed me a tin of cookies and simply said, "I heard. You deserve better." What they had heard, of course, was now public knowledge. I never leaked anything directly. That wasn't my style. But when you leave your iCloud account unsecured, and when screenshots begin to circulate quietly among mutual friends, word gets around. One friend told another, and then another, until the circle widened. Screenshots of texts between Mark and Tasha, flirty messages, half-naked mirror selfies counting down to see you again, notes ended up in the group chat of some former colleagues. One of those women happened to be married to a deacon at our church. From there, it spread like wildfire. The small town we lived in didn't thrive on gossip, but it certainly didn't shy away from it either. People didn't confront me directly with pity, thank God, but they let their sympathy be known in quiet, affirming ways. The woman from the flower shop added extra stems to my bouquet just because. One of the other mothers at the PTA slipped me a note that said, "You are not alone. I've been through it too. You're handling this with grace." Then came the moment that cemented the shift. After Sunday service, while I was collecting the hymnals, my youngest had left scattered across the pew Mrs. Connor, an elderly woman with the kind of reputation that meant she could say anything and no one would question her, placed a gentle hand on my arm. Her voice was soft but direct. "I saw some things. Someone showed me the messages. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. Are you all right?" I looked at her, smiled, and said, "I've never felt lighter." She blinked, clearly surprised. Then she smiled too. Well, that says a lot. People talk. But when they realize the woman they once thought would break is standing tall, they begin to shift their loyalty. And shift they did. The community slowly, silently began to distance themselves from Mark. He noticed too, perhaps not in loud ways, but in cold greetings, missed invitations, and the sudden, inexplicable absence of small social gestures. At the grocery store, he stood behind me in line once. I didn't even flinch. But the cashier greeted me warmly, asked about the kids, and completely ignored him. He shifted uncomfortably and said nothing. Then came the corporate backlash. I hadn't pushed for it. In fact, I'd deliberately not involved Mark's employer directly. But companies have their own policies, and when a VP is caught in an affair with a junior employee, especially one in his direct chain of communication, HR doesn't take kindly to it. Whitman and Rowe had recently updated their internal policy on workplace relationships. While not outright banned, any such relationship was required to be disclosed to human resources, particularly if there was a power imbalance. And Mark, of course, had done no such thing. I heard it first from Meredith, who had a friend in compliance at the firm. The word was that an anonymous tip had been submitted to HR, including screenshots of Mark's messages to Tasha, many of which were sent during work hours, and some even from his company email. They launched an internal review, and within a week, Mark received a formal reprimand. It wasn't termination. But it was the kind of letter that stays in a file. A warning that can derail a promotion, cap a raise, or quietly remove someone from the trusted circle. Tasha, for her part, was transferred to another department. Word had it she wasn't thrilled, especially since her reputation at the office had taken a hit. Mark's colleagues were no longer looking at him with admiration. The whispering had started. He tried to reach out again, this time through his sister. She called me under the guise of wanting to help patch things up. I listened patiently, then said, "This isn't a misunderstanding. It's a consequence." The next day, I received an email from Mark himself. No apology, no ownership. Just a vague complaint that he was being smeared and that I needed to stop feeding the rumors. I responded with one sentence, "Truth doesn't need help spreading." I hadn't built the bonfire. He did. All I had done was stop putting it out. There's a quiet vindication in watching someone unravel by their own choices. You don't have to scream. You don't have to shout. You simply have to be still long enough for the truth to do its job. And my truth. It had never been clearer. The shift from whispers to consequences was almost imperceptible at first. After the HR reprimand that quietly punctured Mark's professional armor, things moved swiftly. The Human Resources Department at Whitman & Rowe had started an internal review, not just a warning this time. It was an official investigation. They had policies, and Mark had broken them. Tasha was a direct report, which meant there was a clear power imbalance. Relationships like theirs weren't outright forbidden, but they were subject to immediate disclosure ethics evaluations and, if needed, reassignment. Mark had done none of that. Worse, he had used company time and resources to carry on the affair. His company email had been flagged for non-work communications. It was more than enough to raise red flags at the executive level. The investigation was quiet, but its presence was loud. Colleagues no longer made eye contact in the hallway. Upper management stopped inviting Mark to strategy meetings. He had been a rising star once, confident, polished, predictable. Now he was a risk, and no corporation keeps a liability on their growth charts. Meanwhile, Tasha's experience began to crumble in tandem. She was reassigned to a lateral department, same title, same pay, different building. A new manager, one known for strict professionalism and zero tolerance for distraction. Within a few days, her social media began to reflect the storm. Her usual curated positivity gave way to vague, emotionally charged captions. "Some people only love you when you're useful," one read beneath a black and white selfie. Another said, "What's meant for you will never require you to beg for it." The comments were limited. She had turned off tagging, but the sadness behind the filters was hard to miss. I didn't comment. I didn't reach out. I didn't need to. She was now living in the shadow she helped cast. Then one Thursday afternoon, Mark showed up at my door. He looked different. Not disheveled exactly, but not the polished man he used to be. His shirt was wrinkled, the collar on his coat slightly curled. There was a weariness behind his eyes that hadn't been there before, not tiredness but the weight of unraveling. "I just want to talk," he said. "One last time." I paused, then stepped aside and gestured him in. The living room was calm, clean, my favorite candle burning on the mantel. The kids were at my sister's. I offered him tea. He declined. I sat across from him silent and waited. He started with the usual: regret, confusion. Talk of stress, miscommunication, losing sight of what mattered. I listened, nodding politely as he unraveled his own narrative. He talked about how the attention from Tasha had filled a void, how it made him feel young, wanted, important. How he thought the break would give him clarity, but instead left him feeling alone and adrift. "I didn't think you'd go through with it," he said finally, looking at me, eyes slightly glassy. "I thought you'd wait for me." "I know," I said simply. But this, the divorce, the community turning on me, my job. God, even HR is treating me like I'm radioactive. You've made it so public. I tilted my head. "I didn't make it public. You did that when you put your hand on her thigh in a rooftop bar and posted it online." Silence. "I know I messed up," he whispered. Still, I said nothing. He was waiting for forgiveness, a soft landing. But I wasn't offering either. Not today. I just thought maybe we could talk. Maybe we're not too far gone. "I don't think we're far gone," I replied. "We're just done." He looked at me, then really looked, and perhaps for the first time saw the woman who had been watching him unravel from the sidelines, not in anger, but with certainty. He stood slowly defeated. "You're different," he murmured. "I'm free," I said. What he didn't know, what he never suspected, was that I had been recording everything. My lawyer had advised it. In a no-fault state, verbal admissions didn't carry much weight in court. But in our state, with adultery and workplace misconduct in play, any documentation of intent, remorse, or admission could be crucial. And Mark, in his desperation to save face, had just offered me a gold mine. The small recording device sat beneath the throw pillow beside me. Perfectly legal, perfectly admissible, and now perfectly damning. When he left, I didn't feel triumphant, just clear. The fog that had clouded my vision for the past 6 months had lifted completely. His collapse wasn't just professional or social, it was moral. And unlike the old me, the woman who stayed silent to keep the peace, this version of me was prepared for what came next. Not revenge for revenge's sake, just truth finally given the space to breathe. The recording was labeled and stored, a quiet piece of insurance, one I might never need. But it felt good to have, like knowing the storm is over but still keeping an umbrella by the door. It was a quiet morning, the kind of stillness that feels earned. Sunlight stretched across the kitchen counter, the scent of fresh coffee settling in the air. I sat at the dining table, my laptop open, and the small flash drive resting next to it. On that flash drive was the recording from the last time Mark came over the conversation he thought was his redemption arc. Instead, it was the final nail in a carefully built case. I forwarded it to my lawyer with a short message, use as needed. No ceremony, no fanfare. Just another step in the process. My attorney responded within the hour. "This is gold," she said. "It solidifies everything. With this and the documentation we've already built, there's no way he walks away with half the house or anything close to it. The house was in my name, of course. Acquired during the marriage, yes, but with funds from my late father's inheritance. We'd debated how a judge might rule on it without ironclad support. Now we had it. Mark's recorded admissions, his guilt, his betrayal, and his own verbal acknowledgement that he thought I'd just wait while he indulged elsewhere tipped the scales. Meanwhile, the fallout continued. It was almost sad to watch. Almost. After the HR investigation concluded, Mark wasn't fired. Not exactly, but he was transitioned. It's the kind of corporate language that means clean out your desk and we'll let you say you left voluntarily. He no longer appeared on the company's org chart. His professional LinkedIn profile changed from Director of Strategy at Whitman & Rowe to exploring new opportunities. And while he might have told his friends it was a mutual decision, everyone knew the truth. The rumor mill had done its job. Tasha, of course, saw it coming. She tried to stand by him at first. A few cryptic Instagram posts hinted at resilience standing by your choices. Love in tough times. But that too faded quickly. Without the status, without the access, Mark wasn't quite as magnetic anymore. She stopped tagging him in photos. Then she deleted the rooftop picture. Then her profile went private. And finally she was gone from his life altogether. No dramatic announcement. No farewell post. Just silence. He called her, of course, multiple times, left voicemails, sent late-night texts. Some he might have thought were poetic, some I'm sure were desperate, but none were answered. That's when I wrote the letter. It was handwritten, simple black ink on cream-colored stationery I found in the bottom drawer. I didn't need paragraphs, just one clear message. You lost a wife, a partner, and your self-respect, all for a woman who won't even return your calls now. I folded it once, placed it in a plain envelope, and mailed it to the P.O. box address he was temporarily using while figuring out his next move. I don't know if he read it the moment it arrived or let it sit unopened for days. But I know he read it. I didn't sign my name. I didn't need to. He'd know. There was a particular satisfaction in knowing I never raised my voice, never made a scene. I hadn't keyed a car or thrown a drink or posted some angry screed online. I let him walk into his own ruin. I just turned on the light so he could see it. Friends continued to reach out. One neighbor brought over a pie just because. A woman from our church asked quietly if I was doing all right. More than all right, I told her, and meant it. I feel light for the first time in years. And I did. The weight wasn't just Mark's betrayal, it was everything I had carried in silence for so long. The feeling of walking on eggshells, of second-guessing my worth, of shrinking to make space for his ego. It had dissolved, replaced with something better: clarity, autonomy, peace. The final court date came and went with little drama. Mark showed up looking worn. He didn't contest anything. The judge reviewed the file, including the evidence we'd submitted, photos, receipts, the voice recording, and ruled in my favor across the board. I kept the house, the retirement accounts, and full legal custody of our youngest. He left with a diminished bank account, no home of his own, and a very expensive lesson in character. When it was over, I didn't celebrate with champagne or music. I simply returned home, took off my shoes, and walked barefoot across the hardwood floor I'd refinished myself years ago. The same floor I used to scrub while he slept in. The same floor over which I'd pushed strollers, carried groceries, cried silently. Now it felt like mine again, not because of ownership paperwork, but because of what I'd reclaimed. And just before bed, I opened the letter I'd written myself on the day he first asked for that 2-week break. I had kept it tucked away, a reminder of how this all began. It read simply, "Don't react. Build. Watch. Win. Mission accomplished." The official paperwork came through on a crisp Friday morning in early fall. A single envelope with the county recorder's seal on it declaring that I now owned the house in full. My name was the only one on the title deed. No shared signatures, no lingering connections. Just mine. I held it for a moment, the weight of it heavier than I expected, not because of paper and ink, but because of everything it represented. Freedom. Finality. A clean slate. The first thing I did was change the locks. I didn't need to. Mark hadn't set foot inside the house since the divorce had been finalized months ago. But I needed to know that every key to my life now started fresh. That Saturday, I stood in the hallway and turned slowly in a full circle, really looking at the house for the first time in years, not just seeing the furniture and walls, but seeing what could be. The old wedding photo above the fireplace. Gone. The heavy oak bedroom set that he had insisted on buying 10 years ago, replaced with a light modern frame I found at a vintage shop on the outskirts of town. I painted the bedroom walls a soft green, the color of eucalyptus. Calm, natural, clean. I replaced the kitchen curtains with bright linen ones that let in the morning sun. I took down the motivational plaques he used to laugh at me for buying and put up a print of Georgia O'Keeffe instead. Her flowers, her desert, her solitude. They spoke to me now. Even the bed felt different. Not just because it was new, but because I slept on one side by choice, not by habit. I read late into the night if I wanted to. I left the bedside lamp on. No one to complain. No one to mock my book choices or ask me to keep it down. With each change I made, the air in the house felt lighter. It was like opening the windows after a long winter and letting the dust of someone else's expectations drift away. This wasn't just about decor. It was reclamation. In early October, I accepted a part-time position teaching writing at the local community college. It wasn't glamorous. The classroom lights buzzed a little and the whiteboard had seen better days. But the students were eager, and I hadn't felt that kind of energy in years. I had once dreamed of teaching full-time, maybe even pursuing a master's degree. That dream had been tucked away for over a decade, filed under someday, while I raised kids, cooked dinners, managed birthdays, and held space for someone else's ambition. Now I was doing it. Even part-time, it felt like a small revolution. I found myself smiling for no reason on drives home from campus. I stopped at the farmer's market on Wednesdays just because I could. I started listening to jazz in the evenings, real jazz, not the pop playlists Mark used to scoff at. Sometimes I danced in the kitchen while I waited for the kettle to boil, the dog watching me with sleepy curiosity. Old friends began to return one by one. Some I hadn't seen since our kids were in school together. They noticed the change in me. "You look 10 years younger," one of them said over coffee one afternoon. I laughed. "Feels like I dropped 180 pounds, I replied, only half joking. There were quiet nights, of course. Lonely ones, too. But even those were mine. I didn't have to pretend. I could sit with my thoughts, journal by candlelight, take long baths without anyone banging on the door asking if I'd seen their socks. The best part, I no longer second-guessed myself. I no longer asked if I was enough. I no longer twisted myself into smaller shapes to fit someone else's mood. I no longer measured my worth by how tidy the house was or how supportive I could be. I existed fully and honestly in my own space. And that was more than enough. The house felt like home again. Not just a shelter, but a sanctuary. Not a battleground of cold silences and simmering tension, but a place where laughter was welcome and quiet didn't feel like punishment. Sometimes people ask if I miss him, if I regret not fighting harder. I always answer the same way I didn't lose a husband. I lost someone who stopped choosing me long ago. What I gained instead was myself. And that was the greatest victory of all. It had been nearly a year since the divorce when the invitation came. It was a letter hand-delivered after Sunday service by a kind woman named Barbara from the church committee. They were organizing a women's night the following month, a gathering meant to foster conversation, healing, and strength among women in the community. "We'd love it if you would consider speaking," she said gently. "Your story, well, it's one we think many women would draw strength from." At first I hesitated. I had never considered myself a public speaker. For so long, I had been the quiet wife, the invisible force behind someone else's success. But something inside me stirred. This wasn't about performance. It was about testimony. The night of the event, the fellowship hall was full. Folding chairs set in neat rows, coffee and lemonade on a long table. Dozens of women, some I knew, some I didn't. Some older than me with silver in their hair, others younger with tired eyes and children clinging to their knees. We were all there with our own stories, some told, many untold. I stood at the front, took a breath, and began. I didn't share every detail. There was no need. I spoke simply, clearly. About how a good marriage can grow quiet. About the signs we ignore, the intuition we silence. About the betrayal that shattered not just trust but identity. And about the slow, deliberate choice to rise from the ashes with dignity instead of vengeance. Heads nodded in the crowd. A few wiped their eyes. No one interrupted. At the end, I opened the floor for questions. A soft-spoken woman in the back raised her hand. She looked to be in her 60s with a faded scarf tied around her shoulders and kind eyes that had clearly seen things. "If you could go back," she asked, "would you forgive him? Would you have stayed?" There was a long pause. I could feel the weight of the room shift as all eyes turned to me, waiting. Some expected bitterness, others hoped for grace. But what I said was the truth I had learned the hard way. "Forgiveness isn't weakness," I said softly. "But staying with someone who breaks you, that is." The room was silent. It wasn't judgment I meant, but liberation. A truth I wished someone had said to me years ago. Forgiveness, I had learned, could be offered without invitation, without reconciliation, without resuming a toxic bond. It was not for them, it was for me. But boundaries. Those were for survival. Later that evening, a few women stayed behind to thank me privately. One told me she had been living with suspicion for years and now felt strong enough to ask the hard questions. Another simply hugged me and whispered, "I thought I was alone." I walked home under a soft night sky, the air warm against my skin, and I felt something I hadn't in a long time: peace. Not the fragile kind that needs silence to survive, but the sturdy kind built from truth, pain, and healing. This story in the end wasn't about a man who betrayed his vows. It wasn't even about revenge, though justice had been served. It was about the quiet, powerful force of a woman reclaiming her voice. About remembering that survival is not the same as living. And that love, true love, starts within. I hadn't just left a marriage. I had stepped back into my own life. Some people say that dignity is quiet. But I've learned that sometimes it speaks loudest when we walk away without burning the house down. I never heard from Mark again after the letter I sent him months before. I didn't need to. I had said everything that mattered. And more importantly, I had moved on not with bitterness, but with clarity. Now when I walk through my front door, I don't brace for silence or tension. I inhale peace. I brew tea. I put on the music I like and dance barefoot in my kitchen. And sometimes when I pass a mirror, I catch a glimpse of the woman I used to be, tired, uncertain, shrinking. Then I see the woman I've become. And I smile. Her story didn't end in heartbreak. It ended in clarity, strength, and the quiet kind of revenge that leaves no mess, only silence. What about you? If you were in her shoes, would you forgive? Would you stay? Or would you do exactly what she did? Walk away with your head held high. Leave a comment. I want to know what you would have done. And if this story kept you watching until the end, hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and stick around because there are more stories coming. Real stories. Messy, quietly brutal, and unforgettable. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is nothing. Just let the truth speak for itself.